Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Damn, it's bright in here. All right, how are you folks doing today? Come on, you can do better than that. It's like over 10 a.m. How are you doing today?
Excellent.
All right, that's a little better. All right, I wanna make an agreement with you all, if you're good with that. We're gonna talk about a bunch of things about AI agents. There are gonna be a few numbers. There are gonna be a few concepts, and I like this to be an exchange. So if you see something that you like, I want you to say one thing. Hell yeah. Let's give it a try.
Hell yeah.
There you go. I knew you got this. This is going to be great. All right. So I want to start with one number. And that number is 450 million.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
I don't even know what the number is about. But yeah, all right.
Money.
That's the number of AI agents we're running a month now. Now it's the hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
All right. So the 450 million, it's a little insane. Honestly, if you ask me and you go back a couple quarters, this number was like, I don't know, 60 million or something. I actually plotted out as I was trying to prepare. So this quarter alone, Q3, was 1.1 billion agents executed, or agentic automations in general. What is insane if you see this. And the reason why I bring this up is, as I was preparing for kind of this conversation with you all, I was trying to think what would be the most interesting information that I could share. And I think it's a perspective on what is happening on the market, given that we are seeing this happen, right? Because this is the true AI universe, but beyond our universe, there's a lot going on. But I think this is a good kind of like a picture of what is happening out there in the industry and how the adoption has been accelerating. I think like we all know that right now, it's so easy to build these things, and more companies are trying to adopt it on their day-to-day and trying to figure it out how we actually extract value from this. And I think there's a few interesting topics for us to talk about it, and I think this was a good, basically a good, again, picture of what we are seeing probably in the broader industry as well. Now, I assume that everyone in this room know what AI agents are, but if you don't, I want to make sure that I spend at least 2 minutes just going over it real quick, so that we can now catch up and be on the same page. You all know LLMs, amazing at creating content. If you ask them like, hey, can you actually write an email for me? They would do it. And if you say like, now make it funny, they'll try, probably fail miserably, but they'll give it a try. But there's a cool thing. If you give it options, and you say like, hey, I have email A and I have email B, what email is better? It's going to be able to choose one. It's like, oh, email A is better because X, Y, and Z, or email B is better because 1, 2, or 3, whatever it might be, right? And it's this ability of make what we would call a reasonable choice that we have been calling like this reasoning kind of like step, and that we can tap into these agents or tap into these models to turn them into agents. Where now, instead of asking to choose emails, you can actually give it a broader goal, and it's going to try to decide what to do in order to accomplish it. So it's going to decide, well, in order for me to do this, I need to tap into your CRM data, or I need to tap into your ERP data, or I need to do a query on your data lake, whatever that might be. But it's that ability to make those reasonable choices in order to achieve this goal. So in the end of the day, AI agents for me goes all the way back to one single word, and that is agency. So the AI is actually controlling the flow versus what you would have on a more traditional automation where you have if this, then that, right? And you're kind of like basically having the code dictate what happens. Now, you now might be wondering, why should I care about this? Like, all right, that's okay. Honestly, the main reason why you should care about this is because in the end of the day, we are talking about automations, but more interesting, automations that were not possible before. So a lot of these automations, they couldn't be done because, well, models were not that great at doing these general tasks, or you couldn't have this as a reasoning engine to take some of the decisions. So in the end of the day, there's 3 main drivers that we're seeing for companies to say like, oh, this is actually a good fit for what I'm trying to do. One is this ability to create. Right? Create a video, create an image, create a text, create a report, whatever that might be. That's one of those drivers. The second one is this ability to real-time react at anything that you throw at them. So If you throw bad data, they figure it out. If a service stops working, they don't just explode, they work around it. So is this ability to react to anything that you send their way that is being the other major driver for a lot of this adoption. And then the final one I would say is the ability to take actions. It's like, all right, now I wanted this model to go out there and schedule something, or to make a decision, or to approve something. And is these three main pillars, I would say, or these three main features that are driving some of the adoption of these automations that are now opening up a bunch of possibilities that you just hadn't before. Now, all right, I think we're all fine. So let me talk about an actual use case just to exemplify. This is actually a customer of ours. I can't name the company, but I can give you a hint. They have 638 different beverages across the globe. There's only a few companies that actually fit that criteria. And they actually were, like, now they're doing a bunch of use cases across the globe, but one of their first use cases they were very excited was this idea of reimbursements. They have a lot of reimbursements requests. As you can imagine, if you're a company selling anything to a broader audience, like, you're gonna have people asking for their money back for all sorts of reasons. And they need to do a bunch of manual checking because, believe it or not, there's people trying to scam companies out there. So they had this entire team that was dedicated to basically do a bunch of busy work, like checking this request, look if it is a new account, if there's any like track record history. And in the end of the day, that was a judgment call that they would do, whether like, should we actually reimburse this, or is this like likely a scam? And this used to take actually 3 days for us. So now they're doing the entire thing with agents, replacing the entire process. And that actually brought the reimbursement approval process from 3 days to 10 minutes. What is insane if you ask me. But it's just one example for us to help us understand, all right, what a use case on the simpler side actually would look like for a company like this. Now, the one thing that I take from everything that we're talking about up to this point is that the genie is not getting back into the bottle, right? This is very clear. I mean, we like to believe, and it's funny because people ask me all the time, like, well, what do you think the future is going to look like? Like, what do you think about that these AI agents are going to take other people's jobs or all that? And honestly, my take is we have way less control over the future of what we'd like to believe we do. We just don't, right? And there is a lot of kind of like money and incentive being applied into the direction. And I think we're seeing enough value out there that people are not going to stop using AI agents. That is the real thing that I can basically stand on. If anything, people are going to use even more and more, and there's going to be more and more adoption. These things are going to keep getting better, either by a proxy by the models or by a proxy by the tech and orchestration and everything that comes along the way. And we are seeing, honestly, I haven't showed this publicly before. I'll show you today. Is we track like lightly like the companies that are interacting with Crew and deploying Crew. And when I look like what are the companies that have the most engineers building something with Crew AI, I look at this list and it's insane. Like you see IBM, Accenture, Procter & Gamble, Microsoft, PwC, SAP. So the point here is, all the major companies in the globe are already on this train, right? And they're not going to come back from this. So again, just a validation on that point that I think this is one of like the more obvious, at least for me, but not necessarily I think for the broader market of kind of like where this thing is going. All right. Damn, you got to be scared there for a second. I think I lost you. All right. The other thing that I also want to point out that we have been noticing is there is a race to the bottom to reduce friction to build AI agents. And you can look at all the tools out there, right? There's so many different ways between no code, low code, pro code. There's so many ways for you to build these things. Everyone's trying to make this easier and easier for technical people, for non-technical people, all those different things. And I think people are not realizing that building is just the beginning, right? That's the thing that gets to me a little bit. So I try to plot out here very naively or simply what I think the distribution of the effort is. So from when you start to learning about these concepts to actually building, to prototyping, and then actually deploying something in production, right? And what I'm noticing is a lot of the market right now, between open source tools or paid tools, whatever you say, it's focused there, right? They really help you with that piece. To the point that I would say that it's quote unquote a fixed problem. I mean, it's gonna get better. There's enough resources being poured into that. Now, past that, it slowly starts to fade away and fades away very quickly, what I think it is a problem. And I think the way that this manifests itself is when I go into calls with these customers or users or leads, whatever they might be, and I get some of these questions. What use cases you have experience with? They ask me. And sometimes they even say, oh, we have hundreds of use cases, but what use cases you have experience building? When I hear I have hundreds of use cases, they're telling me they're learning and building phases, we got it, right? But we don't understand what is your experience in general. And then they start, oh, can you do self-hosted? Or can I have a dedicated IP to basically connect to my own infrastructure? Or do you have role-based level of access for all the things in the platform? Or how I can make sure that I'm not building the same agents twice? Or how I can reuse the tools that I'm building? And it's interesting because all those features, they're not AI. And what is implied on all those features for me is these companies are getting ahead of all these blockers that they know that exist between, hey, my prototype is up and running, and I need to actually materialize the value. I need to cash this out, right? I have been putting a lot of effort into this. And they're trying to get ahead of some of these problems. And I think a lot of the AI agent community, I think, have been falling short and kind of serving them a little bit. So what I hear is oh, we are stuck here where we know how to build, we have all these use cases, but we want to get here, and we want to get here extremely fast if we can. I think what people don't get is the value of agents is not on building, is on using. Building is the tax that you pay in order to get to use them, right? And I think that's the thing that a lot of the industry needs to kind of come to peace with. Now, I try to think about, all right, what this means for the agent development lifecycle. And I try to turn this into a chart that would help me understand better how this plots out. So if I say that on the left, I have the return of whatever investments you do on agents, I would say that the line would probably look like this, where you start with negative returns as you pour money and effort in building this. And only after you're actually deployed or in production that you actually start to get them. So all the way to that intersection point, you're not getting return on what you're doing. So even if you get to the prototyping stage, that is not enough to actually get you your money back or start to realizing the full value that you can get in there. So it has been interesting to see some of this pattern. The other thing that I also like to point out is definitely feels like there is a difference between the regular software development lifecycle and the agentic development lifecycle. And believe me, I try to do a better slide on this one, but I feel like this could be an entire talk on itself. So it's I'm going to refrain from dig too deep, but just to kind of touch on the highlights, right? Most raise your hands if you're a software engineer in the room. All right. What if you're a product manager? All right. What if you're an executive? All right. All right, so I got a sense of the distribution. So what you get to see is on the regular software development lifecycle, for people that are more familiar with that, it's usually extremely straightforward, right? We're going to start a new project. We're going to do Kanban, or we're going to do sprints, whatever it might be. And we know that we're going to do TDD. We're going to start writing tests, and then we're going to write the code. And we know that we can validate it. And what is that version for the agent development lifecycle where, well, can you write tests for this? I mean, you can for some of it, but the models are non-deterministic. So do you cache the response? And if you cache the response, are you really testing something? And then as you build, how do you make sure that whatever you build last is not breaking now, and you end up with kind of like a short blanket situation where you cover your head, but now your feet is cold, and then the opposite happens. So there's a lot of intricacies in here, and again, I think this could be an entire talk in itself, but I also would challenging these companies to start to think about, well, you need to think about these projects in a little bit of a different way. There's a lot of similarities here, but it is vastly different from the regular software development lifecycle. Now, a couple more use cases just to showcase. I want to make sure that I sprinkle those throughout the presentation so we get very material on what we're talking about. This is actually a global 500 financial institution. And a lot of these companies, like between financials, insurances, they have a process that is known by KYC. That is know your customer. It's basically the process of researching someone, a new lead, a new customer, when they engage with this company, right? So let's say that you're a very wealthy individual and you go to this bank will say, all right, we're going to trigger or know your customer process, where we're going to research everything about your life, collect all the information, check your tax returns, make sure that everything checks out. That is a very manual process today for a lot of these companies. So they actually automated this. Interesting fact, the first report was actually more accurate than the human report. What was a wild surprise in my experience. I was expecting it to fall a little short and eventually need some human in the loop, something to make it better. To some part of the process that used to take a week ended up getting into the 30 minutes range. And overall, the entire process actually got a 4x time reduction on the total overall onboarding of your customer. What was a very pleasant surprise. Now, I have been talking a lot about efficiency gains. I do want to highlight a separate use case that is actually around revenue generation. So this is a telecom company. And by the way, anyone here work in telecom? Because I got to say, there's one thing that I don't get about telecom companies. Like, they have their own business, right? But have you noticed that they always do a bunch of other things as well? Like, every telecom company, it feels like they get bored once that they build the infrastructure, and they start, all right, you're going to do SIs now, or we're going to do this now. So it's a little interesting business behavior across all the market, I would say. But this telecom company, they wanted to try a new line of business. They want to say, hey, we have all this data about our users. We know if they have a prepaid, a postpaid. We know we have their address. We have some pattern of that behavior. Can we actually extract that data and give them a credit score so that we can lend money to them if they want to? And can we do that extremely fast without hiring an entire team to basically kick off this new process? And they end up doing their free agents. So the agents look at all the data now, and basically they decide whether what is the score and how to approve the whole thing. And they're able to basically make sure that the money gets to the person within 2 days. And I'm less impressed about the 2 days. What I'm more impressed is basically prototyping a new, extremely new line of business that they had no people doing before, but by using agents just to experiment and test before they actually deploy capital into that. So kind of like an interesting perspective on kind of the use case that you can get. Now, when you look at this, that's the reason why when we noticed this, we started focusing a lot more on the managing part, where we still do a lot of the work on the building, but on the managing part, we realized a lot of people were being left behind. So for us, we have the Crea open source to help all the people in the building and prototyping, and on the managing part is where we have our commercial product, and that's kind of how we're thinking about the business. Who here don't know Crea? All right, so who here knows Crea? And there's people that have no clue what I'm talking about. I'm kidding. But the idea is Crea started as an open source project, right? You can check it out. It's on GitHub, basically allows technical people to build agents. It's very focused on engineers. But then we start doing a lot of educational material. So we do a lot of training with Andrew, for example. And just to let you out, there's a new course actually coming on November 14th. So just letting you know about it. Then we start doing a lot of certifications. So we end up getting a bunch of people, for example, an IBM certified. They have been great partners. We have been closing a few business together. Then we start to notice something interesting. We start to see job postings about Crea. For example, Amazon hires specific people that know that. So it became very clear that there was a business somewhere in there, and we just kept pulling people in to have this conversation to understand what was the gap. And that's kind of how we got on some of the things that I'm kind of sharing with you today, is understanding that gap and what people are struggling with and what I want to build for. Now, one pattern that we saw is that these use cases, and you can even apply to the use case that I show up to this point, they plot into these two axes where you have complexity and precision. And you can have anything in any of these quadrants. And there is no there's no like ugly duck in here, right? Like low complexity, low precision can actually be extremely effective when they pile up extremely fast. There's a lot of day-to-day work that is like, hey, prepare for a meeting, organize my email, whatever it might be. But definitely the high complexity, high precision is where all the shiny use cases come from, right? Because usually they are bigger, they require more technical work, they go across different business units. But this is interesting, at least for people to frame a little bit like on their mental model as you're thinking about your use case as well, like where my use case land in this chart, right? And that is an interesting perspective. Now, we also notice there's usually two schools of thought. There are people that want to optimize more for agency, and there are use cases that are better suited for agency, where you say like, hey, I want agents making all the decisions. I want agents talking to each other, using the tools, delegating work, and all that. And there's people that say like, no, I want to have more control, and I want to do more traditional if this, then that, and then meet an event and do a bunch of other things. But I then want to opt in to agency, where I can have one single LLM maybe, or I can have one single agent, or I can have an entire crew. So we're seeing this pattern emerge as well on the use cases, where some people want a more of a agency optimization, other people want to have way more control, and other people want to mix the two. And I gotta say, the mix of the two is something that we're seeing a lot of success with, but it's interesting to see as the models get better, people start to removing a lot of the scaffolding that they put in their automations at first, because that is not necessary anymore, and they start to add more agents into the system. So it's an interesting behavior that we're also noticing lately. Now, on the orchestration or management part, we also are noticing a few things that seems to be very relevant. It seems to have three pillars, I would say. Like initial pillar around getting started, that needs to be extremely fast. Then there's the idea of building trust that also gets in the way sometimes. And then this final idea of growing. And growing here, I don't think is running a million agents necessarily, but it's more about how you scale effectively. Like how I make sure that across my entire organization, I'm not building the same agents twice. Like, can I reuse them? How I make them discoverable? How I bring out my internal tools? How I give them access to other people? So it's interesting to see some of that pattern developing in there. And I could explode all this into a bunch of smaller things as well that unfortunately won't have time to cover them all. But there is from memory and planning to the integrations, and now there's MCP, there's A2A, there's all these things coming together. I mean, as you know, the industry is moving extremely fast, but there's a lot of inner pieces in there. I did brought a demo real quick to show our platform, but I can skip it. Is that something that you want to see or not really? Hell yeah, all right, so I'm gonna show you real quick. Should take like 30 seconds or something and we keep going. But this is a little bit of our take, right? This is an account that I actually use. It's an older version of the platform, it's an old video, but you can see a little bit on how you can build with no code if you want to, or you can build with code if you want to. There's a lot of different things that you can control. There's tools, there's permissions in these tools, there's versioning. Once that you deploy this, they basically become APIs that you can actually use. This is actually one that we use to review PRs for us, track hallucination, track quality, like number of tokens, execution time. There's a lot of metrics, even ROI, if you actually want to take a stab at that and you provide some information. Ability to train agents, to test agents, compare models, just a lot going on in there. And then overall settings, like control of environment variables, ability to run these agents in there. There's a lot. I mean, I thought for a second about doing a live demo, but I don't think the time would allow it. But I just want to make sure that I showed you some of these things, because actually a lot of them are free. Because again, I do think that the value here is not necessarily on the building part. So if you want to use most of what I'm showing you, you can actually just create an account. It's free. You can start use right away. Even the no-code builder and traces for your local machine or the cloud, it's all free, so you can use that. But that's a little bit on kind of like how we have been thinking about the product side of things. Now, another interesting use case, again, I sprinkle them all over just to help make sure that we make this all real. General Assembly. General Assembly is an educational company based off New York. I'm actually an alumni there. I did my first, I don't think it was my first, but I did my first real like AI course with them back in 2017. Very interesting company. And they basically are using agents generating educational material. So instead of having all the professors basically spending all the time doing one by one. They have the professors now work with agents, and the agents build it for them at a larger scale, and they just reveal it. They actually got 90% on reduction time to create the dev lessons. So they're doing slides, and they're also doing the Jupyter notebooks as well. Very interesting use case. And PwC is another interesting customer as well. They're doing a lot of kind of like coding automations for all the things. I never thought someone would use Secure AI for coding. You have Cursor, Cloud Codex, so many good options out there. Why would you do something custom? And their answer was basically because they're doing it for very specific applications, SAP and Salesforce, so ABAP and Apex, what is not very well-known programming languages. And they have their own internal PwC way of writing that code in those components, so they're optimizing a lot of their agents for that. And they actually saw 700% improvement on the code that is being generated by using kind of like this combination of internal guidelines, internal components that they have already built and all that. Very interesting use case. I gotta say, when I met them and they said that number, it blew me away.
Hell yeah.
All right. I just make sure that you folks are still with me. Now, just start to wrap things up. What I'm seeing on the state of AI agents, it feels like there's 5 different levels out there, like all the way there are people that have, like, they're not even thinking about it just yet. I would say the level 5 is more, what do you call, not a lot of companies aren't there just yet. Maybe like smaller companies, like startups, they're building from the ground up around this, they're getting there fast. But it's more kind of like exploratory now. I think many of the people are level 2, level 3 maybe, and we're kind of like helping them on that journey. But it's interesting to see that despite of everything that we're talking about, it's very early. It's like early days on this. And it seems the adoption pattern is extremely different from what I have seen from LLMs. LLMs, the adoption was all in the edges, meaning someone in marketing like found out about ChatGPT, cracked the group prompt, and the guy's just like swinging, like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I'm not telling anyone. This is my little dirty secret here, and I can get all the work done. And the problem is, well, now there's information that might be leaking. Now there's like ad hoc use cases, people using for different things. People are not talking to each other. Eventually, IT pick it up and block it, and that triggers an entire conversation. So it's interesting that LLMs, like I don't want to use the word brute force because there was not force in there, but the adoption was very much from the edges, what was very interesting. And with agents, we're seeing more of a central deployment. There's usually more of an internal IT organization or development organization that is basically trying to understand how we actually bring this and implement all the controls, all the LLMs, all the different kind of like small connectors and the filters, and then it starts to enable all the other departments across the company. Now, there's definitely an idea of a new stack that is coming together from data management all the way to what I have been calling agentic apps, how you actually experience these agents. And people are trying to figure out, like, what do I use across this stack? And that has been an interesting experience to observe. I would say that the main thing that people are thinking, independently of the stack that they're picking and interoperability, no one wants to get vendor locked anymore. I think everyone got burned on the on-prem to cloud migration, and people are just like, I don't want to be stuck on more on this. I want to make sure that I'm building a way that I have at least like some buying power to negotiate good deals. So they're passing on a lot of the hyperscalers and the model providers. There is a lot of observability beyond the regular traces and stuff. Like, they want to understand everything that is happening, and if possible, tie the actual agent to the business outcome, right? So if you have a lead scoring agent, well, we should map that with closed won opportunities, how we ground that on like the final truth. And we also have governance and a few other things, but the pitfalls, things that I'm seeing going wrong, is people not spending enough on planning the use cases, not clear definition of success, not breaking the process into smaller chunks, or not measuring whatever they define. Those are some of the main things. Like the tech used to be there for a lot of these use cases. It's just like sometimes people are not necessarily doing the pre-work or the prep work. I really appreciate you all for giving me the space to talk with you all tomorrow. I hope that you've liked it. I was trying to bring a bunch of insights about what I'm seeing in the industry out there. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stick around for longer, but we might have time for maybe one question. I don't know, but if you do, now's the time.
Yeah, one or two questions. Thank you, Joey.
Great
Thank you.
talk. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give it up.
Hell yeah. That was a great presentation, Joe.
Thank you.
I started my agentic AI journey with your course on deep learning. So I'm a big fan of you and all the work that your Crew AI team is doing in this space. I'm also currently evaluating your agent management platform, the new release. Are you able to share what are some of the exciting frameworks, features, platforms that Crew AI team is working on as we evaluate all the different frameworks that are coming in the market from different companies, right? What stands out Crew AI in the next maybe 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, I think honestly, he basically were asking, I think, to put in a different words, like what differentiates Crew AI? What are the things that I'm personally excited about that we are building? On the open source side, there's a few things that I'm excited. We're doing a lot of now thinking about long horizon tasks, how we rebuild our memory implementation from the ground up. If we want to leverage more of like rag graph, like memory layers, that has been something very exciting. So there's a few things on the open source that we're doing. About to roll out a new A2A kind of like support that we're very excited about. We did roll out a new MCP implementation as well that I'm excited. On the platform side, I think honestly, it's interesting because we're taking a different angle than most companies out there. I think a lot of the companies today, they're shooting for the 0 to 100 million ARR as fast as I can, what is translating into basically bottoms up, right? Like I want to like as many people using it like on the ground level as much as I can. And we feel like we get that from open source. So what we're doing on the business side, we're actually trying to go for the hardest problems that we can find. So we're doing a lot of like top down, going to these companies and asking like, hey, what is the hardest like use case that you have? Let's crack that first, right? And that has been, I think, refreshing for these customers because again, a lot, especially when you get to the enterprise level, right? Like these big accounts, like they now start to thinking like, I can build this, but no one is giving me like the production that I was talking about. So a lot of our focus is in there. So I would say some of the highlights will be features that these enterprises really care about, right? So role-based level of access, like very deeply, audit logging, all the certifications and all that. And it's funny because it's a symbiotic relationship, right? We build some, but our customers also force us some. Like we just closed the US Department of Defense, I think 2 months ago. And as one can imagine, there's a lot of criteria that you need to match in order to get to land a deal like that. So it has been interesting. Those are some of the things that I'm excited about.
Yeah, we're going to have one more presentation, guys. But Joe, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. I appreciate it.